Good morning. Good morning. Welcome everybody who has been patiently waiting in the studio. We apologize for the delay this morning. Just always technical issues, but trust me, this is going to be worth the wait this morning. We are so excited you are joining us on Heartset Mindset Reset. For those of you that are coming right in from Humanity Stream, welcome. Those of you from YouTube and Facebook Live, we are so happy to have you here with us. I can see you all coming in. We're excited to see you today. We'd love to see you. Put in the chat, where are you coming in from today? And we'll be able to share any questions and comments with our special guest, who I know who y'all it is. I know you all know who it is today. So we're excited to get going. I'm going to start right off the bat and just introduce the show. Welcome to Mindset Heartset Reset. This is a dynamic live weekly show that really provokes introspection. We love to cultivate compassion and love and spark positive change both in you and the world around us. Through our insightful discussions with our remarkable guests, we are going to give you practical tools based on authentic real-life stories that are going to nurture and empower your own mindset, open your heart, and create new connections that are going to give you the courage to hit the reset button on your own life. We have a simple mission for the show, and it's to expand love at a global scale with a vision to shift humanity's future into one which we can all thrive. So we're really excited to get started. I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Dr. Roshanak Hashimoon. Welcome to the show, my friend, and thank you for coming today. Dr. Roshanak is a credentialed computational, clinical, and behavioral neuroscientist. I know, she's absolutely brilliant. Her work has supported the transformation of countless lives all over the world. As the founder of Access to the Path, she combines the power and process of science combined with emotional and spiritual intelligence, so that you can really create innovative strategies and look at helping both your own life and the lives around you. So we're so excited to have you with us, Dr. Roshanak, this morning. Thank you for being here. I want to get right into this. We have so many people already here with us today, and there's not a big introduction that needs to be done for our guest, but over to you, my friend.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us live. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to the recording, we are super excited to have you join us for this special, amazing two-part series that we are doing with the wonderful Neale Donald Walsch, multi-New York Times bestselling author, spiritual, he doesn't like to be called a spiritual leader. I'll say inspiration.
Inspirational leader. We can do that for sure.
Inspirational leader, spiritual inspiration to all of us, life inspiration to all of us. And so what we really wanted to do, because he's done such an extraordinary body of work for so long, decades now, after he penned the first Conversations with God, that amazing book that really caused tectonic shifts in the world. That's right. Worldwide. The book's been translated into 37 languages. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for like 137 weeks. Yes, 37 is a magic number. He has written to date 40 books alone. Forget about everything else that he has penned, and all the work that he's done live and retreats and blog posts and all kinds of things. Jacqueline and I have worked with him for the last 2 years. We've done weekly shows on Clubhouse with him. He is simply extraordinary. And believe you me, he is the real deal. I didn't believe it at first. I learned. Absolutely extraordinary. And so what we're doing today, to help all of you and to commemorate everything he has done to date, is to have a special two-part series where we're really talking about, essentially, we're going to try to get to the top 10 of all the things that he has learned, all the life that he has lived, and all the love that he has loved, all that he knows about living, loving, and learning today. We are super excited to get that started. We know it's going to take a while because we're doing the deep dives. This is not your usual conversation. And so we're doing a two-part series on this, and we're going to get through as much as we can today, but come back and join us next week to get all the rest of it, because we have a lot to look at. And it's not what you've been hearing, because, Neale is very prolific and very generous with his time and his energy and whatever resources he has. But we'd like to get into some of the less heard, some of the more kernel truth importance of what we need to understand or glean from all that he has from his extensive and immense life experience. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, the wonderful Neale Donald Walsch. Jacqueline, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce Neale and get us started.
There you go. Well, that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much, Neale. Welcome to the stage. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Well, Neale, I want to tell you how this idea today was inspired. First of all, we've just recently stopped doing our regular shows on Clubhouse, and really it's Roshanak and I didn't want to miss our time with you because it's so precious to us. So this was our way of bribing you back into some time with us. But this was really a thought that had come to me. Recently I asked my own father, and I said to him, if there was 10 pieces of wisdom from your own life that my kids, his grandkids, could gain that he would like to share, could he share those with us? And my father flat out said no. But I'm hoping today that as, Grandpa Neale, that you will start taking us through not just what you've learned from writing the books or all of the experiences that you've had since, you wrote your first book when you were 54, if I am correct. Conversation with God. And I was 4. And that was when I read your first book. And so the exciting part of that to me is what has Neale and what is Neale going to share with us over the next 2 shows? These beautiful pieces of wisdom through your own stories. And that's how I started the show, is we all get to learn something through our own life journey and our own life story. And it's different for each of us. That's what we want to learn from you. What are those pieces of wisdom that nobody's heard yet, that maybe the only people that would hear it would be your grandkids? You've got the whole world now at your fingertips to share those pieces of grandchild type wisdom to our audience today. So I'd like to turn it over to you, and you get started in any way you like.
Well, I don't think that it's going to be pieces of wisdom that no one's ever heard before. That would be pretty difficult in this world where we are receiving so many messages from so many sources. But it is possible that my grandchildren may not necessarily have heard some of these things. So I have, in fact, created a list, 10 life lessons to share with your grandchildren. And I'd like to start off by saying I'm not necessarily thinking of 3 or 4-year-old grandchildren. Much of this would be beyond their ability to embrace or comprehend. But we're talking about 12 to 14-year-old, 10 to 14-year-old grandchildren who can begin to comprehend. This would be my list of lessons to share with my grandchildren. And the number 1 lesson: you may have heard that there is such a thing called God. And it is true. But God is not something or someone to be afraid of. The definition of God is pure love, which needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. So yes, there is a God, and this entity is a being, if you please, a source of energy that created everything. The universe, all of life, and you and me. But again, it's not something to be afraid of. It will never punish you for anything. It will never judge you for anything. It simply is an expression of pure love, the kind of love that you have for your grandma, that requires and demands and expects nothing in return. So that's the first thing that I would share with my grandchildren. The second thing, if I can go down my list, that I would share with my grandchildren is,
hold on. Can we
hold on.
Can we deep dive into these? So
we do that after. We're both sitting here going, wait. Do you want to go through a few, Neale, and then we can swing back?
No. I want to do, this is your program. I want to do whatever you want to do.
So Jacqueline is all about love. But if I may, Jacqueline, just a little quick question for the wonderful Neale Donald Walsch.
Of course.
So I learned as a young child, I remember, I went to Catholic schools, and there was some church event. And as a little girl, I ended up getting this little plaque. It's like a little thing, just nothing, little plastic thing. It was a picture or there was a relief of a child on their knees praying, and it said, God is love. And I never forgot that. And it really pushed into my psyche the truth of God being love. And so I've always felt that the highest, truest expression of love is the divine, or as you say, the God of your understanding, whoever's understanding, our understanding. And people don't understand love. Not to say that any of us do, but they mess it up. They find transactional relationships. They call that love. All kinds of either aspects of love or fragments of love or corruptions of their interactions with others, and they call it love, and they give love a bad name. So I was wondering, and Jacqueline and I did an entire month series on understanding love, if you could help us understand better what this God is love looks like, feels like. How does it express itself? How can we know that? How do we tap into it? How do we express it? How do we let it flow through us? How do we receive it? Can you tell us a little bit about that, please, so that we can understand better how God is love, and how, as you always say, we are individuations of the divine, how we too are love, and so what that dynamic flow looks like, please.
I want to say that God is an energy that we call love. And I think all of us know what love is, what it feels like. But most people have experienced love as, to use your word, as a transaction. In other words, kind of a trade deal. Like nations, nations have trade deals with other nations. I'll give you this, you give me that. I'll give you this, you give us that. So most people have learned from their religions, actually, that love from God is a trade deal. In other words, you give God what God needs and what God wants, and God will give you what you need and what you want. God will give you God's love if you give God your love in a way that God requires it. It's not just by giving God love, just saying to God, I love you, God, I really do love you. That's not enough. You have to go to God or come to God, if you please. Most religions tell us in a certain way, by a particular path. And if you don't take that particular singular path, even though, by the way, there are 4,000 religions on the face of the earth, but if you don't go to God by that singular path, if you happen by accident to choose the wrong path, if you become a Jewish person rather than a Christian person, or a Muslim person rather than a Buddhist, or whatever you choose. If you make the wrong choice of your religion and your belief system, you're out. God no longer loves you. And while we might find this hard to believe, that God would behave in such a way, most of us have been raised in families where much of the love we received was also transactional. In other words, if we did something wrong, love was withheld from us, and it turned into punishment, if not direct condemnation. You're sent to your room for the rest of the day or whatever it was, to say nothing of corporal punishment. I lived in a house where there was actually corporal punishment. I mean, to use a simpler word, it's called spankings. And I would get spankings if I misbehaved. So I realized, oh, well, then God is just like my parents. God's just like my father. You get a spanking, and you may have to go to your room forever if you don't do it the right way. So what I want to share with all of you is my understanding is that that's not what God is at all. That God is the source of pure love, and that pure love, as I mentioned a moment ago, requires, needs, expects, and demands nothing in return. And we find that most human beings find that very difficult to believe, because the largest number of human beings, I want to say the majority of people on the earth, have never experienced love in quite that way. We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us without condition. without requirements of certain kind, without a kind of a trade deal, without, I'll give you what I have, you give me what you have, I'll share with you the best parts of me, you share with me the best parts of you, let's have a trade deal. But as soon as I don't get from you what I hoped or wanted or expected to get from you, then I stop giving you what you hoped or expected to get from me. And the deal is off. We call it divorce. Now, this doesn't mean that in pure love we have to subject ourselves to the direct abuse of another person, cruelty of someone else. That's not what we're talking about. But is it possible to love another person simply because of the wonder of who they are? That's how God loves us. And that's how we are invited to love God, simply by admiring with joy and happiness the wonder of who they are, without receiving anything back from them in exchange for the love that we are feeling. You know what's interesting? Many people can feel that way about a pet. Many people have put up with gosh knows what from their own dogs, making a little mistake in the house or refusing to eat their food or failing to stop jumping on the furniture or whatever. We put up with behaviors from our pets and we don't stop loving them. We don't say, I'm going to not love you anymore. We love them forever. Behaviors of any kind are suddenly acceptable to us. So, you know what I learned in my life, Dr. Rowe? I've learned that I need to love the ladies in my life and the other people in my life, for that matter, the way I love my dog, the way I love my pets.
Unconditionally.
Without condition. That doesn't stop. It's not a transaction. It's not a this for that. It's not a quid pro quo. And so that's what I want to suggest to you, is that what I've been told in my conversations with God is that God is simply the source of pure love, needing, expecting, requiring, and demanding nothing in return. Can we believe that? When all of our religions, or certainly most of them, teach us just the opposite, that's the big challenge of the moment. And that's the first thing I would teach my grandchildren, is that God is pure love, not someone to be afraid of, not someone, because we're told by our religions it's good to be a God-fearing person. Yeah, I was told as a child, be a God-fearing man. What? So, you know what I was told as a child? You're not going to believe this. I was taught as a 9-year-old child that it was a mortal sin, that what the Catholic Church teaches is an unforgivable sin if it's not confessed in a confessional. If you miss church on Sunday, if you miss Mass one Sunday of your life and don't have a chance to go to confession, maybe you're hit by a car the next day, you're going to hell for the rest of eternity. For the rest of eternity, because you missed church one Sunday. Talk about an outcome that outweighs the offense. And yet we still call this divine justice. Hello?
I think because, at least from the perspective of how we work in neuropsychology, it's easier, faster to get someone to change a behavior when you start with a negative reinforcement. So as children, the one thing you can get when you have a child and you want them to do something is to scare them, right? There's a Mike Myers has a really Michael McIntyre, I'm sorry, has a very funny show that he does, and he talks about his little children. He can't get them to do anything, and as soon as he says, "You're going to catch your death of cold," they're like, "Okay, I'll put my coat on." So we think, we don't realize that children are actually listening and learning deeply and internalizing. So we'll start with something that scares them, and then it never gets corrected. And I also love the idea that there's a difference between love and like, that you might maybe not like your dog or somebody for a little while because of something that they're doing, but that doesn't mean you stop loving them and all of what goes with actually loving somebody, which is very different than liking them, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. And by the way, telling a child you're going to catch your death of cold if you don't put a coat on, it's not scaring them. It's telling them the natural outcome of certain events. So
Right.
it is perfectly okay to say to a child, no, don't try to jump off the Empire State Building because you could hurt yourself. That's not called scaring them. But so sharing with children in a loving way, the logical and expected outcome of certain events is different from saying, I will spank you, or I will punish you, or I will, or no dessert for the next month. That's different. So there's a difference between caution and punishment.
And so what about the idea of let go and let God, as it were? So if the person or the child doesn't do what you want, what you think is good for them, or you might know is good for them, but certainly you think is good for them, and then you just let it go. This is one of the needs that you were talking about, that we have no needs. So what do we do if we're trying to help somebody, and out of love, we use whatever tactics we deem to get, the means justify the ends?
Well, my father had a unique way of approaching that. He would never tell me not to do something. He would just simply tell me what was likely to happen, or what could very well happen, as a precautionary piece of information. If I did a certain thing, played in a certain way, or went out to the middle of the skating rink where the water was, where the ice was thin, or whatever it might be, he would tell me. But then he would never prohibit me. He would never stop me from doing it. He'd say, "Take my word for it, son. You can take my word for it, or try it. And I'll be there to help you if you get into a jam. I'll be there to help you. But if you don't believe me, give it a try." And when my father would say that, I wasn't tempted to go ahead and try it, because I didn't feel like it's something I shouldn't do. He was giving me some very good, straight advice. So I very rarely did what he suggested that I do not do, not because he had some punishment hanging over my head, but because he simply told me very, very directly and very simply what could likely happen, what he had learned. And he would say, "Son, I'm 50 years older than you. Trust me on this. I know what's going to happen. Don't go to the middle of the skating rink."
Why do we not listen when God says, "I know what's going to happen"?
I love that.
Well, yeah, because God
I said that to my son yesterday.
Yeah.
So, I'm 54 years old. Why don't you believe me?
And now I don't even say, "Why don't you believe me?" I just say, you can trust me or not.
That's good.
Life is about learning. If you want to learn the hard way, and I would say, I've got 9 children, and I've said to my 9 children, "Sweethearts, you can learn one of 2 ways, the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is by listening to someone who's already learned and suffered the consequences. The hard way is by suffering the consequences yourself. Choose. You get to choose."
Amazing.
Neale, I have 3 children. I love that you gave that perfect reference of, your grandchildren at kind of the age of 12. I have a 12, a 13-year-old, and a 16-year-old. So this conversation is perfect for me, because I get a lot of questions. My children have not been raised in the church at all, but they have certainly been raised with, I read Conversations with God before I ever had children. So they are being raised in the way that I learned from the books that came through you. And we talk about God on a regular basis, and they have a lot of questions about God. And you're answering them beautifully this morning. But one of the questions I would love to be able to express clearly to them as well is, we know that in the stories of the Bible, and the Christian stories anyways, is Jesus was a child of God. How do we help people understand, and I've heard you say this many times, but, we're all children of God. Can you get into that a little bit more with us so that we understand that there's not a separation, that we are more equal?
Sure.
It's something that I've been looking at expressing with my children as well.
Sure, that's the second of my 10 lessons to share with you.
I love it. Perfect. Sorry.
I love it.
The second of my 10 lessons to share with your grandchildren is, we are all one.
Mm.
Nothing is separate from anything else. Therefore, we are all a part of that essence, that reality that we call God. And to help a 10 or a 14-year-old young person understand that, I would say, think of yourself as a wave on the ocean. Now, the wave is not separate from the ocean. It's simply a rising of the ocean in individual spectacular, individual form. And when that beautiful expression, powerful expression is complete, the wave returns back to the ocean, recedes back into the ocean whence it came. And that's exactly the relationship that you have with God. You are simply an arising of all that God is in your own individual form. And when that arising is complete and your expression is full and complete, you will return to, if you please, the ocean of divinity. So, you know what I say to my grandchildren? Go out there and make waves.
I love
Beautifully
that.
said. Beautifully said. That really should take the fear for us out of living in so many ways, knowing that we're not alone.
And there's, which brings me to item number 3 on my list.
Of course.
Which
I'm going to stop talking.
No, it's perfect, because you're leading me right into what I wanted to say next, which is my third of my 10 lessons is that takes the fear out of life. The third lesson is in 2 words. Children, there's enough. There's enough of everything you need or think that you need to be fully joyous and completely happy. All we have to do is share. There's enough time, there's enough money, there's enough love, there's enough of everything that you imagine you'd like to have or that you once thought you needed in order to be happy in your life. All we have to do is share. What you share, you create. Children, remember that. What you share, you create. Share your time, and I give them a perfect example. Sometimes we think, I don't have enough time. A person says, could you give me a hand with this? Could you give me a hand with that? Could you help me? Neale, could you help me tomorrow with this? And I say, I don't know. I don't know if I have the time, man. I got a really busy schedule. I don't have enough time to do that. But when I find the time, this is a simple example, when I find the time to help someone else, even when I thought I didn't have the time, suddenly, guess what? I have the time. And I was able to do what the other person needed for me to do and asked me to do to help them. And the time just magically appeared. What you share, you create. And I learned that as well with everything, not just time, with money, and especially with love. So when you share what it is you'd like to receive, you create what it is you've always wanted to have. And that's what I would tell my grandchildren when they're 14 years old. Children, remember this: what you share, you create.
There's just a quick little add-on of what that reminded me of. I was watching the series The Chosen, and Jesus says to one of the disciples who says, oh, can I stop off and see this friend on the way to where we're going? And he says, if we don't make time for our friends, we won't have any friends. And I find people are so caught up in what they're doing and what they think they need time to do, and what we all want desperately, going back to love, is that connection to love and to be loved. And when we don't make time to love and to be loved, and then we hear people like Vivek Ramamurthy saying, oh, loneliness is an epidemic, what we experienced during COVID when we were disconnected, how much we suffered on so many different levels. Then we start to see how beautifully interwoven these top 10 of yours are, and how they affect each other profoundly and practically. That if we don't make the time, if we don't give the love, how are we getting the love? And not transactionally, but because we are in that state, in that flow of love, right? I mean, I could go into a physics explanation of this, which would be amazing. But if we are in a space, let's just say, of love, then we are in fully that river or that ocean of love. So that's how we're living.
Not only in the space of love, which we are using as an example a lot here today, but living in the space of sufficiency. That whatever we're talking about, money, love, time, what talents, whatever it might be, there's enough I have learned in my life, there is a thing called sufficiency. There's enough of everything I thought I needed in order to be joyful and happy and successful and peaceful and serene in my life. There's enough. And so my fear that, oh, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough of love, there's not enough of you, there's not enough of this, there's not enough of that, there's not enough. That fear turned out to be totally false, very not real. There's more than enough. All we have to do to experience that is to share what it is you think there's not enough of, and you will discover that there's more than enough for all of us. That's been my experience. I could be wrong, but I haven't been wrong since 1943. So
Well, we know that about you.
This is why we love Neale.
So Neale, can I play on this little bit of a question with you then as well? That, when we started this, you said God is pure love, and we moved to the next point, number 2. And sorry if I'm being a little repetitive, but I think that these are so important that it's worth repeating a little bit and making some connections. That if God is pure love, we could literally, one of your books, I always was one of my favorites, because you said, what if we replaced God's name with love? And
not just with love, but with pure love.
But with pure love. Yes, absolutely. Sorry. Just because some people do get stuck on the word God, if you were brought up in certain religious ways, it can create a barrier that's been brought up for you. So if God is pure love and we're all one, we're part of that divinity, that means that somewhere in all of us, the biggest part of us is also pure love. Have I got that right?
Well, it's the point I made.
Right?
I hoped I said exactly that.
Okay. I'm carrying a little chain here as we go.
We are each a wave of the ocean of divinity, and that the wave is not something other than the ocean, but simply an individual expression of the ocean. Therefore, we are not something other than pure love, but merely an individual expression of pure love. And the question before the house is that how we choose to express and demonstrate ourselves? Mm-hmm. Do we choose to know who we really are and demonstrate who we really are? Those who make that choice live a life, from my observation, of joy, peace, serenity, happiness.
Beautiful.
And you know what? When we are these beautiful waves, and I love, Jacqueline loves love, which I do too, but I always talk about connection. When we connect with another wave, we make a bigger wave. We are a greater expression of that love. We are more like we are more greater. It's a bigger mirror reflecting, as it were, that love. And I think that there's something really beautiful. We talk about wave dynamics when we come into this beautiful harmony, this constructive, when we say we vibe with somebody else, and it really amplifies the feeling, the sensation of knowing, the experience of love. Right? Sorry, I heard something weird. That amazing experience of love. So I think it's if we spend just a minute thinking about it the way you said it, the way Jacqueline said it, or however we might filter through our own perceptions, it becomes so powerful and so practical. You wonder, why aren't we really leaning into this more? Right?
Yeah, and I think the answer is fear. We're just afraid that we're not going to get out of life what we have hoped to get out of life. So when we set a fear aside, then we can step into the experience that you're describing. I learned that by spending a year on the sidewalk. I had no place to go. I was living outside. I was homeless. I was one of the homeless Americans. I lived the great human nightmare. No place to live, no place to sleep. I mean, sleeping on the ground, not for a couple of tough weeks or bad months, but for an entire year of my life, without a nickel to my name, knowing when I woke up in the morning that I might not eat anything that day if I couldn't get enough money by begging people for a few coins to maybe go to the little fast food place and get a bag of French fries. So I've learned all about not enough and all about sufficiency. And I've learned, what's that song say? I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow. It's life's illusions, I recall. I really don't know life at all.
Neale, can I go back to that story of yours? We know there's a lot of suffering going on in the world right now. And I know that sometimes when we talk about love and the ease and there's enough for everyone, that people get a little stuck, because when they actually look out at the world, and depending on the lens or where you live or
Yeah,
the
because we're not
experience that you're
sharing, so it
having,
looks like there's not enough.
right?
Yeah.
There's more
That's
than
what it
enough.
is.
We throw enough food away from the restaurants of Los Angeles, Tokyo, and Paris every evening to feed an entire village of third world children for a week. So it's not a question of there not being enough. It's a question of there not being the will
Distribution.
among the people to share and to find a way to get the stuff of which there is enough to all the people. And that takes
Agreed. Yeah.
what we call charity or love.
Yeah.
It's something. It's impossible for me to believe, but 653 children die on this planet every hour of starvation, while we throw away, as I mentioned a minute ago, enough food in the restaurants of Paris, London, and Los Angeles to feed those children for a week. So, what is going on here with our priorities as a species? Let that be our question for the day.
And this is what I was going to ask. The next part of this question was, May happens to be Mental Health Month. And this is where I think a lot of people struggle. And so when you lived on the street and that experience for you, obviously that came from a time in your life where you were having your own different types of struggles that led you to that time on the street, and then your experience on the street. And many people have their own different struggles, whether it's living on the street or other struggles. Mental health issues span depression and anxiety, high stress these days. How do people practice that sense of connection and love for themselves? And, I love what Dr. Roshanek said is, we know during COVID, we felt very separated. But the reality is that if we're actually fully connected and we can practice love on whether it's a daily basis, a moment by moment basis, how do we keep that connection so that we're not feeling separated, so that when we feel enough, we're not suffering ourselves and we feel more willing to naturally, because I believe it's our true nature, that love is generous, love is kind, love is happy.
You're
It's all of
answering your
those
own
things.
question. You're answering your own question.
Okay. Well, what would what did you do in the days when you were in a very difficult place? How did you come to know yourself as love in those toughest times in your life?
By finding a way to give to others what it is I wished to receive.
Mm.
It's really quite simple, and I learned that from a guy on the street. He was a fellow street person. There was a park in the city where I live, and in the park there were like 6 or 8 street people, a couple of ladies, 4 guys who were down on their luck, street people. But one of the guys was walking around the park one day, giving everybody in the park, a little bit of the change he had collected that week. He said, "Hey guys, you might need this more than me." And he was sharing with everybody a quarter or a $50, and sharing his coins with everybody. And I saw him do that, and I realized, what is this about? But you know what I learned after being in that park for a week with him? He always had enough to at least put some food in his belly, even though he was giving away part of what he had to others. Somehow or another, he had connected with a magical formula in life: that which you give, you inevitably receive. Or as some people put it, what goes around comes around. So what I learned on the sidewalk from this old guy in the park was, if you want anything at all in life, don't be a seeker of it. Be the source of it. Be the source of it in the life of another, and you become resourceful. It's like magic. You become actually a sorcerer.
Love it. I forget the name of this wonderful lady. She's quite old. I think she's still alive. She was in the Holocaust. And she very briefly had come by a piece of bread, and she shared it with the other ladies.
Of course.
And then they were doing this walk where they were going up this hill, and basically they were going to die, unfortunately. And it's a movie cliffhanger moment, but it was real life. Just at the moment that it's her, that she ends up, the cavalry comes in and the U.S. whatever, and everybody's saved. And but she, when she was found, she had a broken back. She had so many issues internally and structurally. And the reason that she was able to survive until that last moment even was because the other ladies helped her. And she said, just, you don't think about it, but you think it's fair, because as children we're born with a very strong sense of fairness. And there's so many scientific experiments to show this, that she shared what she had. And at that time, a piece of breath could be the difference between life and death, but she shared. And so when it was her time, when she needed to have her life supported, they wouldn't let her go. They literally carried her, even though it was painful. And I mean, real suffering for them. They didn't let her go. They didn't let her die until actually they were all saved. And I'm, giving the sort of Reader's Digest version of the story. But what you're saying is another real world example under the most extreme cases of how this works. And you see this also now with the Palestinians. What little they have, they share. They're always protecting and taking care of each other. Somebody's whole family is decimated and destroyed, and there's just one person left, and they take them in and they, love them and raise them and live with them as their own. This is real life love that allows us to survive and to thrive.
That's been the experience of Israelis as well.
Yeah. All of them, everybody. We're all human. We forget we're all human. Humanity's team. We're all on the same team.
Okay, Neale, number 4. We have to get to number 5 today. It's going to be tight for time.
The fourth lesson I would share with my grandchildren: there's nothing you have to do. There's much that you may want to do, but there's nothing that you are required to do in your life. Nobody does anything they don't want to do.
Right.
Some people do what they want to do and then say they didn't want to have to do it. In this way, they can be both the hero and the victim of their own story. Resist the temptation to be the victim and the hero of your own story.
I love that.
Accept responsibility for everything you do and do only what you truly want to do, given the result that you wish to experience. Then just do it. And stop saying that you didn't want to do it. Because if you don't want to do it, don't do it. It's as simple as that. But boy, have I met people in my life, including, I see, maybe even this person right here. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've done something that I wanted to do and then declared afterward, I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to have to do that. I was, forced by circumstances to do it. Nobody is forced by circumstances to do anything. So the big lesson I would teach my grandchildren: there's nothing that you're required to do. Accept responsibility for the decision you've made and stop pretending that you're the victim and the hero of your own story simultaneously.
Neale, you know what's going to happen? My kids are never going to do a chore at the house again.
But you know what?
We're going to say, but Neale said,
You know what's interesting about my parents found a way to induce me to want to do it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And they didn't do it by force. They just did it, with certain other devices that allowed me to get to a place where, you know what, I get it. If I make my bed every morning and clean up my bedroom and don't have it look like a royal mess, there's a certain outcome that I desire.
Right.
It's really quite simple. So parents who understand that process create outcomes that their children desire, which cause them to want to do whatever they're doing.
Which brings us back to the whole fear thing. So we are, and this is, biologically so viable that it goes back a very long time in the history of the world, and also to extremely basic and simple organisms, is that we work on a reward system, and that works. And so when we say we don't want to do something, but we do it anyway, it's because we want something greater.
I think that's very
Excuse
true.
me, whether that's something, whether that's something greater, whether that's something greater is, I want to live, so I'm going to give you my wallet. Whether that's something greater is I'll take out the garbage because I want to be able to go out later. Whether it's not through fear that we're, inducing people to do things as we believe. Our perception is this was done through fear. I feared for my life, and therefore I did this. I feared I wouldn't be able to see my friends, and then I did this. As opposed to, I wanted to see my friends. I want to live longer. I want this outcome, like you're saying, and therefore I'm going to do this thing, which is the way to the other thing that I want to get that reward. So it's so basic. If we were going to be honest with ourselves, that would release so much of the victim that actually robs us of our true power that we have. We don't have all this control, but we have so much power. And if we step into our power of I choose, if we could just change our language to I choose, how would our lives change?
I agree with every single thing that you said.
I love when he says that. I'm just kidding.
How much time do we have before we go to number 5?
We can go anytime you want. We have,
we can choose what we want.
I mean, how long is this program?
We have 9 minutes left about. It's for 1 hour, Neale.
No, okay. We have another 15 minutes or so because we're on 46 minutes.
Number 5 on my list that I would tell my grandchildren. There is no such thing as right and wrong. Mm-hmm. Tell this to your 14-year-old grandchildren.
My 17-year-old doesn't love this.
Exactly, you're in trouble.
There is no such thing as right and wrong. There's only what works and what does not work, depending upon what it is you're trying to do. And I would share with my grandchildren that most people, you will observe, my children, you will observe don't know what they're trying to do. They are not clear about what it is they're trying to do. That is, they're not clear about the outcome that they are seeking to produce.
Yes.
But once you're clear about the outcome you're seeking to produce, then you will see that there's only what works and what does not work, given what it is you're trying to do. So there's no such thing as right and wrong. I mean, morally speaking, if you're heading west in the United States toward the ocean, toward the Pacific Ocean, and you want to go to Seattle, and you make a left turn and head towards San Francisco and turn south, it's not the wrong way to go. It simply doesn't work. If what you want to do is get to Seattle, it doesn't work, but it's not morally wrong to go to San Francisco. Well, maybe San Francisco. But
no judgment.
Right, that's right.
So what we have to do is take our moral judgments out of the equation and just look at what works and what does not work, but get very clear on what it is that you're trying to do.
And this is why clarity is, sorry.
Those are the first 5 of the 10 lessons that I would share with my children.
And this is why I think clarity is power, because when you are very clear on what you want and why you want it, then you step into your power and you move in that direction and you do what is necessary to get there. I'm not saying you are going to be harmful or hurtful, because that also goes back to choosing all the other good things that you want, and connecting to the love that you are. But this is how people are always looking for motivation. There's this thing known as intrinsic motivation when we're doing something that we love, that is our passion. And so we don't need all this outside stuff pulling us, because there's something within us that's pushing us, and we enjoy it so much more. So to me, something is shown to be true when you can see it from different angles, and from every, angle that you see it, it makes sense. You come up with the same answers. So I love that.
Hey, we're not done
Voila.
yet today. I know what you're
Voila.
going to say. You're going to be like, I've given you my 5, I'm out. So we're not going quite yet. I still have a couple of questions based on these first 5.
Exactly.
And for everyone that's listening, you can leave a comment in any of the chats based on where you are, whether it's Facebook, it's YouTube, it's Humanity Stream. You can leave a comment. We will see it here. We're happy to ask Neale any questions based on what we've talked about so far today. And I know you're all going to come back next week to hear the next 5. But one of my questions before we go here today, Neale, is what do you think are some of your greatest moments in your life that have really given you the ability, as much as we've talked about this before, we're all born as babies, we're born as this pure love. And then somewhere along the way, things go sideways and life comes in, and we don't know all of these lessons that we're getting from you today. I'm literally writing everything down today. So I'm going to be able to turn around and share this with my children as well. Make sure we're clear on all these points. But what do you find, or could you share with us some stories from your own life that were really your, the word that's coming to me is your almost expansion points, where your greater understanding gave you that clarity. And I know I've had these moments in my own life where I've almost felt expanded by an experience. Do you have any of those experiences in your own life you could share with us today?
Well, of course, my year on the street was
Yes,
the
absolutely.
quintessential experience that falls into that category, because it taught me that there's enough, that there's nothing I have to do, that we are all one, that there's no such thing as right and wrong. All these lessons that I would teach my grandchildren, I learned by being out there on the street. You want to go to the college of the sidewalk, and do it. I dare you to do it just for a weekend. Forget about a year. Just leave your house Friday morning at 9:00 with about $1 in your pocket, in change, not even folding money. And don't come back until Monday evening at 5:00. Spend the entire weekend, all day Friday and all day Monday and Saturday and Sunday, with that $1 in your pocket, and no place to sleep and nothing to eat. Just do it for 4 days, and come back and tell me what you've learned, what you've discovered about yourself, about people, and about life. So, yet the quintessential experience in my life, of course, was my time on the street. But we don't have to go to the college of the sidewalk. We can learn these things in everyday life if we simply look at what's happening and stay awake. Watch what's going on and draw the conclusions that what is going on will lead you to. Or if you can't figure it all out, call Dr. Roshanak. She'll tell you everything.
Well, can we touch on that stay awake? What does that mean, stay awake? I mean, sometimes I'm awake and sometimes I'm sleeping, but what does that mean to stay awake in your life?
Well, what it means to me is to watch exactly what's going on, what's happening, how it happened, and what will happen next, depending on your input, depending on how you respond to what's happening. In other words, don't be asleep at the wheel. Really watch what's going on. Watch what's happening. Nothing has, the second major event in my life that I would share with you is my marriage. When you decide to spend your life with somebody, I'm talking about, 24/7, virtually every day of every hour, or every hour of every day, I meant to say. But when you spend that kind of time with a single other person, if you're paying attention to what's going on, you're going to learn very quickly. You're going to be caused to remember what works and what does not work. So that's the second major event of my life that has caused me to experience life in a way that brings me the results that I seek to achieve. Marriage. Just spend the next 20 years, or the next 20 days for that matter, with the same person, and watch what it brings you in terms of awareness.
Mhm.
I'm heading into my 20th year this summer, Neale, with my marriage. So I've learned many phenomenal lessons from my
What's interesting
marriage.
about that, Jacqueline, what's interesting for me is I thought I knew myself pretty well. I really did. I thought if nothing else, maybe I didn't understand all of life. Maybe I wasn't clear about everything that's going on around me. But I surely thought I knew myself pretty well until I wound up living with a person for 16 years who showed me parts of myself, not all negative, but positive as well, who showed me so-called negative and so-called positive parts of myself that I actually didn't realize existed within me. She turned out to be a wonderful mirror, and she stopped me short by showing me parts of myself that I had to admit, you know what? That's true. I'm not really very happy with that part of myself. Thank you for showing that to me. And then she would show me other parts of myself. She'd say, do you realize how incredibly generous you are, with your time and with your talents and with your resources? And I would say, well, yeah, once in a while. And my wife would say, once in a while, you're the most emotionally generous person I've ever known. And I trust her. She's not just saying that, to flatter me. She's saying it because it's her lived reality. That's why I want to say that spending your life in close connection, intimate connection with another human being is another huge experience that can bring you to clarity about what life is all about, who you are, and how to make it all come together in a way that serves your soul's agenda.
In the book, The Art of Happiness, that was written by the Dalai Lama and a Western psychiatrist, I've told this before. I remember it came out quite some time ago. I remember this one part in particular where he says, "I love my enemies," and now this is different than what you're saying, but related, because until I meet them, until they come into my life, everything that I believe about myself is just a theory. I am who I am in theory only. And then it's not until I am challenged, as it were, by, let's call them enemies, by others, that I can see the truth in practice of who I am, as opposed to living in this sort of theory fantasy of who I am. And for that reason, I embrace, I believe is more closely what he said, I embrace, let's just say, those who challenge me. And I'm sorry, you wanted to say something? I'm just going to stop there for a minute because I saw that response in you, Neale.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that's exactly profoundly my experience. That's my precise, exact experience.
And then the other thing is, of course, that in all our relationships and this idea of love, so in the Quran and in Islam, the family is so important and love is so important that creates family and relationships and so on, because that is when you really are tested in the expression of love, in discovering the truth of love and your being. So as we embrace those who show us the truth of the expression of who we are from the challenge, then that challenge can also come from the intimate, as you're saying, from a spouse, a partner, a child, a parent, a sibling, a whoever, that because of the love that you have for them, when we talk about choosing our behavior, we will see, tolerate, accept, stand in the space of something that is uncomfortable or more, not more uncomfortable, but something more or something uncomfortable or both, because of the love and the relationship that we choose to keep, to nurture, to cultivate. And so there's a beautiful reason for having these relationships, and that is the greater expression of a deeper love that is the truth of who we are. And I love that.
Conversations with God said to me, in the absence of relationship, you are not. That doesn't necessarily mean a relationship with another person, yes, in a particular way, like a spouse or a partner. But in the absence of a relationship with the tree in your backyard, with the person across the street, with something other than who you are, in the absence of a relationship with anything else, you are not, which is why, by the way, solitary confinement is the worst kind of punishment that you can receive if you're in prison. They don't whip you or chain you or torture you. They simply put you in a room in a cell all by yourself for about 6 months and see how you like that. And you realize very quickly, oh my gosh, in the absence of anybody or anything else, I can't experience myself. And so that's profoundly true for me.
I found that in a
I've learned
revelation.
that it is only through my relationship with other people, places, and events that I can experience and express, and then recreate who I am in the next grandest version.
I found that in a revelation that came to me as I've also been on my journey, that we need each other. As you said, how do we define ourselves but through these interactions and these experiences? And the brain has pathways that allows us to understand, to process who we are, our own agency, but in the context of other environment, as you said, another human being, trees, whatever else there is. And we also know from science that sensory deprivation, which was at one point, allowed legally in the United States to see what happens to us, is no longer legal, because in the absence of being able to receive any kind of input from connection to the world, sound, sight, light, other people, things, whatever, that our systems begin to completely fail and we absolutely change. We need each other. We were designed for this. We were created for this.
So value, treasure your relationships with other people for sure, and with every other person, place, or thing in the world. Value your relationships. And that brings us to next time we're together in a couple of weeks. I will share you that your life is not about you. It's about everything with whom you have a relationship.
So I love how Neale is such a pro. He knows how to wrap it up and right on time. We just sit back and let you do all this. Beautiful. And it's next week, not a couple of weeks. We will have Neale Donald Walsch
next week.
Next week. We're not going to make you wait that long. You see how kind and loving we are? To follow up and finish, God willing, the rest of the 5 and so much more. And we're so grateful for the time that you give us and the love and the experience and the sharing, and for being this beautiful portal to truth and to ourselves. Namaste, Neale. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my lovely friends. It's been wonderful to be here with you. See you next week.
We'll see you next week. Okay. See you next week, everybody. Same time, same place. We'll look forward to the next 5 on Neale's top 10 things you would tell your grandchildren. We're excited to hear more of this wisdom, and it'll be a great next part of the learning. So thanks, Neale. We'll see you next week. Dr. Roshanak, always a pleasure. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody. Same time next week.
Bye. God bless.